Patrick Hueller, Mari Kesselring. How are you this evening?
Good, doing good.
Excellent. Thank you both for making time away from parenting and writing and editing and publishing and everything you've got going on to talk with me this evening.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
So I try never to summarize other people's books or other people's biographies because I'll fail miserably at both. So I'm going to ask Mari if you'd start just by kind of giving an esteemed audience kind of an overview of your background in publishing, and then Patrick, same question.
Sure. Yeah. So I started my work in publishing working in the school library market. So I was working a lot on nonfiction books for kids, a lot of series like biography series or like event series, and kind of tying in with curriculum standards. So I did that for a while, and then more recently I've had the opportunity to work on fiction. So I actually started by working in the school library market, doing some fiction projects as an editor there. And then now I work with North Star Editions, which is a publisher of trade books for kids. So we have two imprints that I manage, Flux, which is young adult fiction, and then Jollyfish Press, which is middle grade fiction. So I oversee the full editorial side of our production. So I do all the acquisitions and a fair amount of the editing. And yeah, so it's a dream job for me, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah, and we just have a really great team and a lot of really talented authors that we have published. So it's great.
Are you doing content editing and
Yeah,
what's the word I'm struggling for? Content and copy editing?
Copy editing, yeah. So I mostly do content, like developmental edits, where we're kind of looking at the full picture of a book, and then also line edits when we're looking at just kind of the sentence level construction. I don't do much copy editing or proofreading. We usually freelance that work out. So yeah, so it's mostly just a lot of like back and forth and working with the author to kind of make sure that everything is cohesive and looking good with the plot and character arcs and all that fun stuff.
Oh, you're living the dream. That sounds amazing. And Patrick, same question to you.
Yeah, so not an editor at all, author. I went to grad school at the University of Minnesota, got my creative writing degree, my MFA, really in fiction. Spent 3 years writing actually 2 manuscripts, 2 books. The original plan was definitely not to be writing for kids. I always thought I was going to be primarily a short story writer of literary fiction for adults. For better or worse, I basically thought of myself as that kind of person who would write those stories that show up in the New Yorker, which are about people who nothing really happens in the stories. It's all about who they are. And I love those kind of stories in college. I fell in love with those kind of stories in college and thought that's what I would do. And out of college, I was hired to write for the school library market. And specifically, I started getting books. I was asked to write books for reluctant readers, a high-low kind of book. So for high school age content, but maybe a 3rd or 4th or 5th grade reading level. And so I was all of a sudden, for the first time ever, thinking about things like a plot and how to write a page turner and what is it that makes kids turn the pages, or readers in general. And it was through that I have published almost all of my books, not through the school library market, but I've ever since been writing books with that in mind, almost always for middle grade or YA audiences, and thinking about how do I write the kind of book that kids burn through. They just can't wait to read the next page.
And now that you are a tremendous success in the world of middle grade fiction and young adult fiction, will you eventually go back to short stories?
Yeah, I've never truly stopped. I actually have published several of stories that I both wrote in grad school and since. And they are those kind of stories that I just talked about. about the sort of the internal stuff that's going on in characters' lives. But it's a lot harder to write those kind of stories, I think, for two reasons. One, with what's going on in the world right now, the story starts to feel kind of like middle class white problems story, and that just feels strange right now to be writing that story. But more than that, I just feel so busy. I'm a full-time teacher and I got a kid and so forth, and so I got to motivate myself to get to the computer. And so it's more fun to imagine fast-paced, action-filled narratives than to sort of do the sinking in that I had to do to write the short stories, which also, the short story collections are very unlikely to get picked up by agents or by publishers. And so you're kind of just doing one-offs and then waiting months and months to see if they get published in a journal.
But then at the right party, you get to mention it, or better yet, somebody mentions it to you. And that's...
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I don't get to have that, yeah. Like at book readings, they always feel so awkward because it's primarily adults there. And so it's like, do I really want to read this book that's for kids out loud to adults? So the nice thing about writing for adults is that that's who shows up to those kind of things.
Well, it occurs to me that I either maybe showed some favoritism or failed to show some favoritism, because obviously the middle grade and the young adult is the far superior genre, just in case the steamed audience wasn't in any doubt. And we should mention that Patrick and Mari are married. So this is a middle grade ninja first, because no one else has been crazy enough to bring their spouse on the show with them. So hopefully this will be wonderful. I think it goes smoothly. So my next question is, when did you two meet? And how?
Well, I will say, I think she was smitten with me before I was smitten with her.
Oh my God. Well, no. Yeah, well, we met, it's actually super kind of dorky, sort of, like, so we were both on the literary journal at our college that we went to, Hamlin University, and that's how we met. Like, can you think of a more like nerdy writer editory like story?
Should we share the fun fact? Like,
oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. So I am an identical twin, and Mari is also an identical twin. So she was a little bit behind me in school, and so we were all at Hamlin together, and she had heard of these Hueller twins. Is that right?
Yeah. But let me clarify that I was behind you in school because I'm younger than you. Oh
yeah. Yeah, I would say ahead of me intellectually.
Important point of clarification.
My sister and I both went to Hamlin, and then we had heard that there were identical twin boys at Hamlin like a couple years ahead of us, and so we were kind of like a little bit on the lookout for them, like, oh, that's interesting. So when I met him, I actually kind of thought he was sort of weird.
Correctly, yeah.
But yeah, we worked on the lit journal together, and that's how we kind of got to know each other. But we didn't actually end up dating until like we'd both been graduated for some time.
Yeah, we were both spoken for throughout college.
Yeah.
And
then did your siblings also date at least? Go out once?
That's right, they're not married. No. Unfortunately, for reality TV reasons, I really wish that were the case. But
we could have had our own show.
Well, now that you've got progeny and they can see how well the genes work, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's how science works.
We're English people, so we don't really know, but I don't think so either. Yeah.
And you have a child together that's a singleton, right?
Yes.
Thank goodness.
So you worked on a journal together. So before you knew anything else about each other, like your soulmates, you knew that you were both. You must have shared some sort of affinity for the written word, for literature.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I would say also, like, not only were we both on a literary journal, but it was a literary art journal, and we were both like definitely like literary people, like so. I think we definitely like had the experience of like enjoying the same stories and that sort of thing.
Well, and I did become like, I always kind of thought, I always appreciated Patrick's writing when we were on the journal together, because he was also like, we were also in a creative writing club together
Which you
at
started.
Hamlin, which I started. And, but I always liked his writing. You know, that was kind of like the first thing I noticed about him. I mean, other than, of course, he's cute. But the writing, I was always really into his stories when he was, and that was back when we were doing more like literary fiction type of thing. So, yeah.
So did you at one point also want to write, or have you always been editorially minded?
Yeah, so I've written some. I've done some work for hire projects, some fiction, some nonfiction in the past, and I do some writing on my own. My original plan was to like become a full-time writer when I got out of college, but then I was kind of like, well, I had some internships in editing that I really liked, and I was like, well, I would like to make it more of like my career right away and not like starve in the meantime. So I did still do some writing and, you know, hope to eventually, you know, publish. So right now I write some middle grade and some young adult. I have a couple projects that I'm working on at this point.
So she's selling herself short. She actually is a great writer, and she's also a machine. I'm like totally envious of this because when she's done for hire work, you know, these are very tight deadlines you work on, and sometimes you get like series, and she just like churns through these things, and meanwhile I'm like agonizing, like what do I do next in the story, and she just churns through, and they're just these perfectly tight, beautifully written plots. So.
Yeah, we write really, like, our processes are completely different. Yeah.
So what's your process then, Mari?
So I'm sort of more of like a planner and methodical. So I tend to like plan out my plots ahead of time. And I think that kind of comes from my editing background too. I don't think I'm good at just kind of going on the fly. I like to kind of know where the story is going. And yeah, I mean, I think in opposition to you.
So my whole motto is I just do whatever I can to keep the fingers typing, and for me, knowing where the story is going, it bores me, and so I'm much less likely to actually keep writing. And so I do that whole obnoxious artistic thing where I'm like pretty much just going by the seat of my pants, sentence by sentence, just because I want to be surprised by what happens in the story.
That makes sense. And Patrick, I know you've got a new book, and I promise we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about writing, but super rare an opportunity. I have to ask some of these follow-up questions. So this difference in style of writing, does that bleed over a little bit into your domestic life? For example, does one of you file the taxes, pay the bills, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say.
Oh, Mari, I am shocked that that is the case.
Yeah, the overlap is complete.
Yes, that's true. But I would also say that, you know, it makes me look good to be like the one doing the bills and taxes and things like that. But Patrick has much more patience at a task than I do. So he, for example, will play with our daughter for hours on end, where I can probably do an hour and then kind of like, I need to do something else now. So, I mean, I think it's a good balance between the two of us.
Yin and yang kind of thing.
Yeah. I won't lie. I mean, it does cause conflict sometimes.
That sounds like a great partnership.
Yeah.
It's similar to what Mrs. Kent and I have got going on. She's usually on the bills and the taxes, and I'm playing for hours with my child. So,
and good, don't we?
What did I want to ask you? So with obviously with the 4-year-old thrown in the mix, and you're both writing at different times. How do you navigate that? Will one of you watch while the other one writes, and then you switch off, or how do you make time for your writing?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate what we do. It's kind of an amazing thing. Even while we're pretty much fully quarantined right now, we will realize that we hardly see each other throughout the day because we're just taking shifts. You know, we just go back and forth. So I mean, we can hear each other clacking away at the keyboard, and you know, like if we have a question, we can ask it. But like, we're pretty much usually we're not in a very big house, but one's downstairs and one's upstairs. Yeah, we're just doing shifts right now.
Well, we don't always really know what each other is working on either. Like, I will find out that Patrick's been working on something and I won't know much about it, just because it's just not something that we have a ton of time to discuss right now.
Yeah, I mean, when we first were dating, we were always sharing projects
Sending
with each other.
things back and forth all the time. Yep. But it's a little harder now.
Oh, that's wonderful. Your passion for art tied in with your love for each other. Oh my God, it's a poem. And do you swap critiques or edit each other at this point?
Yes, but not nearly enough these days.
Not much now. Yeah.
But I really think that's, well, Mari's actually the best editor I've ever had, so that's why I'm saying not nearly enough. This is great. Do you know William Maxwell? He was like the editor of New Yorker, and for years and years, and he wrote a book, So Long, See Tomorrow. Anyway, there's this great quote that I'm not going to get exactly right, but he was apparently so gentle and agile with his editing that he often would make supposedly somewhat substantial changes, and the reader and the writer wouldn't notice. Like, you know, he was so in tune. And Mari really takes the time to like try to figure out what kind of story am I trying to tell, or what are her authors trying to say. This isn't supposed to be a sales pitch, by the way. This is just real. Like, this is early on in our relationship, she did quite a bit of editing in my work, and I just always felt like emboldened without feeling like she was cheating me out of like actually telling me what she really thought. And I don't think I've ever done with
nice.
I don't know if I've ever done that for you. So
Patrick, I'd say I bounce ideas off Patrick. Like, I'll be like, what do you think of this, idea for kind of like a plot or something? That's kind of where I am right now with my writing, is I'm planning some projects. So because he's so good with like ideas and like interest level of things, that I just find it really helpful to get his insight on that kind of stuff. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, I would just say too that in response to Patrick, like, I always believe that as an editor, I always believe that the book belongs to the author. And so I always kind of bring that mindset into editing and thinking about what they want the book to be, and just trying to make it the best it can be within their vision.
yeah, it sure does.
Well, that sounds like an incredibly productive and almost professional in that respect. Part of your relationship, you're both professional authors. You take it, so there's no got your notes earlier, honey. Oh, I burned dinner. Just yours, though.
Yeah, I think we do. Like, I think there are probably pluses and drawbacks to. One of them is like lack of money is a drawback, but to being married to someone who has similar interests, literary interests. But one of the, I think, the huge advantages is that, Mari totally gets it when I feel like I'm just like absolutely on fire with an idea and I got to go to the computer and get it down. And I think hopefully she would feel I do the same thing. Like, that's the time when we like say, I got the kid, you go do your thing. And I think that's hard for the rest of the world sometimes to understand. Yeah,
well, that is true. And I also say that we don't always like what each other writes either, like,
you don't?
So, and we have very kind of different styles really as writers, and different interests too. So it's, I don't know, I think that just kind of adds to what we can, what kind of feedback we can give each other.
And is it like, so I've heard of relationships between actors where one of them will have an audition that goes well and go on to get the part, while the other ones had 3 auditions all and so close but didn't work out, and now there's just uncomfortable silence at the dinner table. I'm so happy for you. So I'm assuming throughout the years, one of you has had good publishing news, and then the other one, because that tends to trade off.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think we're mostly on it, just kind of like, supporting each other. But I'm always talking first. I'll let you, but
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I think for the most part we are just like supportive of each other. She knows that, for instance, sometimes she'll be talking about her job, and even though I love my job and I'm an English teacher, high school English teacher, she'll look at me and be like, "You're jealous of what I'm telling you right now, aren't you?" Like, she has a really cool job often, and I do sometimes feel jealous of that.
Yeah, and I think I had somebody tell me once, when, like, right before we got married, that like sometimes you might need to like take a walk when you're in professions that are so similar and your experiences are going to be different, you know. And that is, I mean, I think for the most part, you know, like Patrick says, we try to be supportive of each other, and we also understand kind of like all the emotions involved in, you know, being a writer and trying to get a story on paper and then trying to publish a story or a book, and all the kind of ups and downs that go with that. So I think that we can support each other in that way, because we get it, you know.
This is the Middle Grade Ninja podcast, not marriage counseling with Rob. So I promise we're we're not going to transition to talking writing and publishing. So Mari, let's start with you. Tell us about, is it North Star Editions? When did you go straight from college to them, or how did you get hooked up with this really cool job?
Yeah, so I had been working on fiction projects in the school library market, and then I ended up working at North Star Editions about 5 years ago. It was a new company that was built to publish trade fiction, basically, but the first imprint that we worked on was Flux, which actually was previously owned by another Minnesota publisher, Llewellyn. And so North Star Editions, they were looking to sell, Llewellyn was looking to sell Flux, and North Star Editions purchased Flux. And so that was when I came on. And that was right after I had my daughter. So it was like 2016. There you go. 2016. Yeah. So, and yeah, so that's how I got into the fiction. I, you know, and I got hired on as managing editor of fiction with the idea of kind of like, you know, come in here and like, you know, let's acquire some more books in young adult. And that was July. And then that October, we ended up acquiring another imprint, Jollyfish Press, which is middle grade fiction. And they had been previously owned by a Utah-based company. And so it was kind of unexpected. We weren't really, hadn't been planning on doing that, on purchasing that imprint, but the imprint was folding, and we saw it as a great opportunity to bring on some new books and kind of jump right in. So that was great because I was very excited about working in young adult. I've always loved young adult, but I also have had more experience on the middle grade kind of level of things. So it was really exciting to bring that in. And, you know, since then we publish about 10 books per season. So, you know, around 5 in each imprint. So about around 15 to 20 a year. Yeah, so it's been great. We've been able to continue to build the title list, and we've gotten lots of good starred reviews and all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
When you come home and you say, honey, good news, I'm going to be a managing director, Patrick, do you just pull out, well, here's all of my back catalog, all my manuscripts that could immediately fill slots?
Yeah. I mean, I would never think such things. Oh, definitely. I don't say such things out loud very often, but yeah, I will say that I don't know if you've read Flux or Jollyfish, but they do just make great looking and highly reviewed books. And so, yeah, it's definitely that when she got that job, it wasn't like I was publishing left and right. So of course it was like, yeah, I got tomes and tomes to hand over to you. You know, you're a new imprint. You need some stuff, but we didn't actually do that.
Yeah, we did have a discussion about it because he's a great writer and I would love to publish him, but at the end of the day, we were kind of like, it feels like a conflict of interest. It just is not a good idea. And it's tough because obviously he has great work that I would like to have, but there's a lot of great work out there. And yeah, so we've kind of had to be a little bit careful about that just because it just didn't feel right.
I mean,
to me either. It felt so right and so wrong at the same time. Yeah. No, I very much agree that
I'll get that contract. Worry about how it feels later.
Yeah. Well, the part of it is like, hey, who cares if this isn't published? But I will say that it would have felt also diminished for me. You know, like I would have always had to say like, this is my wife's, not like I'm proud of her, but like people would always say like, oh, I see how that happens. That's nepotism, you know?
Yeah,
So.
we just don't want that.
No, I'm teasing. You absolutely made the right call. Makes sense. So, Mari, for all of esteemed audience who's listening, who thinks, well, that sounds like a wonderful publisher, I'm pulling up the website as I listen to the podcast, and I want to get involved. What types of projects are you looking for right now?
Yeah, sure. Since this is middle grade, I'll talk about Jellyfish Press
Great.
in the interest of time. But Flux is also always looking for manuscripts. So we have open submissions. We do not require an author to have an agent to submit to us, which is a little bit unusual. As an independent publisher, we just have a lot of great flexibility in that area. But we accept agented and unagented manuscripts. And for kind of like what we're looking for Jellyfish Press right now, I'm looking for more contemporary middle grade. And in particular, looking for own voices stories. So stories where the author has a similar background or experience as the character they're writing about. And that includes books written by diverse authors or of diverse perspectives. And in addition to that, I'm also looking for middle grade humor that is very tricky to do, to write books that are funny for kids and that kids actually think are funny. But we feel like there's a really good market for middle grade humor, and so we'd love to see more of that. We have done a lot of, or a fair amount of middle grade kind of fantasy, both more contemporary and then kind of more like high fantasy, and or also just kind of like a magical realism type stories. So we're still looking for that. And yeah, I would say with Jellyfish Press, because we're an independent publisher, we're often looking for something that is different and stands out. Because we have a somewhat smaller reach than the big five, we want something that's really going to surprise readers. So I actually brought a couple of examples. This book, I want to make sure I just mention this. So this is actually the art copy, but it's called Story Magic, and it's written by Lauren Gale, and it is coming out in October, end of October. And this is a really kind of a good example. So it's a high fantasy set in a magical world with this character here. And in this world, magic is created through storytelling. So in order to grant magic to a spell, you have to first tell a story aloud. So it's a really cool book because this character ends up doing some spells and magic working, and in order to do that, every time she has to tell a different story. So there's a lot of stories within stories. It also has an added interest point where in this world, girls and women are not allowed to do magic, so they're not allowed to tell the stories to make magic. It's a belief that that's bad luck and like bad things will happen if they do. But this protagonist begins to kind of question that in this story. So really great book. I just wanted to mention it because it's coming out in October. So yeah, so we often, like story magic, look for something that, is a story that can be relatable to people, but also has an interesting twist, like that storytelling angle, something different that you might not always see in the book. So we're open to submissions. You can look on the Jellyfish Press website and find out what we're looking for, and how to submit. So we'd love to see things.
Jollypress.com?
Jellyfishpress.com.
And if you like middle grade humor, I don't know if you ever read this series called Stew Stories, but it's quite hilarious. What a beautiful transition, because Patrick Hueller, I believe you have a new book available. So please tell us about your newest book, Read at Your Own Peril.
I do indeed. I will do the Mari thing. I'll hold it up.
Beautiful.
It's going to be very awkward because I like to gesture, so pretty soon it's going to get like this. So the idea behind Read at Your Own Peril is it's sort of a dystopian story in which there is a coma outbreak And it turns out that, or at least the world seems to believe that students are literally going into comas because they are reading. Like, reading causes comas. And so reading is quickly banned, made illegal. You're a criminal if you read. The reason I came up with the book was thinking, like, what makes students read? Like I said, I'm an English teacher as well, and so I'm always thinking about why is it that some students read. And I think that as a society, we do a pretty good job. I call it like the librarian way of getting kids to read, which is to say that it is safe and good for you and warm, and like there's a very welcoming message that people who are dedicated to reading give to kids. And I was thinking, why doesn't that work sometimes? And I think one of the answers is because we also want reading to be dangerous and thrilling and even illicit. Like we want a lot of things to be that way. And so I was definitely trying to work with this metaphor without hopefully the reader necessarily realizing it's a metaphor of what it feels like when you're not a confident reader to be told to read, which is this idea of your eyelids getting so heavy that they're going to close, your eyes glazing over, getting bored. And so I literalized that, or metaphor, I don't know what the right way to put it, but literally the students go into comas. And the idea is that you're taking a risk in reading this book. I'll tell you, it's been really fun. I've never really liked promoting my stuff, even though it's kind of a necessary evil. And it's been really fun promoting this one for that reason, because I can use that same silly reverse psychology, telling people, don't you dare read this book. And hopefully, they feel like I do want to read this book because of that.
Well, it's very fun. As I was reading, I was like, oh my God, am I myself risking a coma by engaging with your novel? I think metaphoricize is the word we're going to go with. I'm just going to nominate that into the
We're
world.
all word people. We all agree. I think that's how English works anyway, right? Don't we actually just kind of agree on it, and then we get to use that as a word?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
If I get the both of you plus like maybe 20 more people, we could probably get it in Webster's.
It'll be in the dictionary.
Yeah. And then who is the ideal reader for Read at Your Own Peril?
Well, the idea, I really believe that I hope that I've written a book that like pretty much anyone who is 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade could read it and dig it. There's a little bit of a sort of romance in there, despite it being hopefully a little bit scary. I don't think that it's, once you actually get into it, I don't think it's the point where many readers would close the book. They're so scared, and so hopefully, but I admit that like my dream reader is the kind of reader who thinks they don't like reading, and they find this book and they tear through it, and they're able to say not only did they read, but they read a whole book, and they read a whole book quickly. That's kind of like, but then again, now that I'm saying that, then I'm like, I've been told that's like, why would you ever want to market to the ones who don't read? So also kids who like reading will like it too. I really think that, as an English teacher, it's hard not to think about those students who don't seem to tap into the energy of a book that you're teaching. And why is that? And so I think this is the kind of book where a student could independently tap into that energy.
How do you fight off despair if you're working with kids, they're not finding Updike interesting, or they're not finding Twain interesting? What hope do the rest of us have?
Right. Well, one thing I would say is I think there's a point in my teaching career, I've been teaching a while actually now, where I found myself arguing too much with students, being like, no, you're wrong, and here's why you're wrong. And so I finally had to like do a little bit of a reflection and realize, now wait a minute, like, is that really why I liked reading? Did I like reading because adults told me that, no, this is good, you're wrong? And so I try not to fight that. My high school is, during this pandemic at least, and I hope it extends longer, we are actually trying to do an independent reading workshop model like throughout this semester. We're currently at a distance, and we'll see if we end up going to hybrid or what. But that's what we have adopted. And I was one of the proponents of that. I really think that we make a mistake when we say, no, we got to read these 4 texts this year. And instead, I want to think, a reading workshop. The idea is the students who arrive who already like reading, instead of reading 4 to 6 books, will read literally hundreds in a year. And the students who claim not to like reading, hopefully will like it more by the end. And also, just by the nature of how the classroom is set up, will hopefully have read 15, 20 books in a year. So it just feels like a win-win if we can sell it to our students. So I'm just a big believer in what matters most is just that you're churning through the pages as a reader.
So are you teaching the students virtually? Are you back in person or on your way back in person?
Virtually, yeah. And we'll see how long that lasts. But my school, I think they've made the right call, and they've done a really good job of actually surveying the families and figuring out what the families want to do, asking us and actually listening to our input. And I think that both families and teachers just felt like this was sad. Like none of us got into teaching to be miles away from our students, but that this was just where we are right now and what we need to do for everybody's sake.
And Mari, same question. How is, now that we're talking COVID-19 and the pandemic, because eventually all conversations get there. This year, we're talking either pandemic or did you know there's an election? That's coming up too. So those 2 things eventually will rear their ugly head in any conversation. How is that impacting North Star editions, and how is that impacting what you do?
Yeah, so we've been able to kind of keep on keeping on. We're all working remotely. I mean, with publishing, I think it's a little bit easier than some other professions to work remotely. A lot of the people that we work with were already working remotely, and obviously I don't even have any authors currently working for me that live in my state. So always contacting them via phone and email anyway. But I think one of the big things that has happened in relation to COVID-19 was we had to move some pub dates out, so the publication date. So we had a lot of books that we were planning to release in the spring, and just because everything was so kind of tumultuous during the spring, we were concerned that it might not be a good book buying time and people might not be buying books. And we were also hoping that by moving pub dates out, some of our authors might be able to do in-person events when things aren't so much in lockdown, which is something that is really important to a lot of authors and also just a good place to drive sales for a book. So we ended up moving out the pub dates for several books, some into this fall season. And, unfortunately, a lot of those authors still aren't able to do in-person events. But I think that I think people kind of figured things out a little bit more, and so they have opportunities to do more virtual things that everyone's a little bit more comfortable with now than they might have been in the spring. And then we also have a couple books that got moved even further out into spring 2021. So it'll be interesting to see what the state of the world is at that point, and maybe they will have the chance to do some more in-person events. But yeah, it's been, I think, just like for everybody, it's been a challenging time for publishers, just like any other companies. So, except for, grocery stores that are just monetarily anyway doing very well, though I feel bad for the people who have to report to work there now.
And Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, let's not talk about him.
So, several billionaires have done quite well throughout the pandemic, so. Good guillotine. We could sort out this wealth inequality problem. Anyway. Talking about making authors more wealthy, let's talk promotion strategies during quarantine. So Mari, I'll start with you, and then we'll come back to Patrick, who's actively promoting a book. So Mari?
So it's just been different. We've always kind of done a lot of promotion through like Instagram and, other social media opportunities. So we do book trailers for all our books, and we do sometimes giveaways for like retweeting the book trailer. So that kind of goes up on social media. So we already were always kind of using social media as one of our kind of top marketing opportunities. So really the thing that's changed the most is that kind of in-person event type thing, and whether or not that's something that can happen. I know we've had some authors do virtual events for their book release, and I think that's worked fairly well, but it's just not the same thing, you know, as being in person, and, you know, the author being able to like meet the author one-on-one, and they like, you know, sign a book. The other thing that has been a challenge is that a lot of the big book events were canceled, you know. So we had Book Expo in June where, you know, there are several authors that were planning to go to that with us, and we were going to have a booth and everything, and that got canceled, you know. So those opportunities where you're have the opportunity to make a lot of connections with booksellers, there's just less of that now.
Oh, that's too bad. Are you not able to, it wouldn't be the same to try and hold massive Zoom events. Then everyone will just be saying, you talk first, no, you talk first. That's not going to be a good.
Yeah. Well, and apparently Frankfurt, which is this big, you know, book selling event, is going to be totally virtual this year. And so, and like I've already set up some meetings with like, with some people in related to that. And it's like, the time zones are all different because that's where like a lot of international publishers like get together, and you have the opportunity to like acquire books that were published in another country. So like often the UK for us. And we've only done a little bit of that, but it's funny because it's like, okay, I have this UK publisher, you know, who wants to have a meeting with me, but then it's like, okay, well, what's the time zone difference? You know, like who's going to be up late or what? So it's a whole new world.
And Patrick, how are your exploits going so far with marketing? Other than you've just appeared on the greatest podcast you could ever appear on. So that part, excellent and amazing.
Right.
Other than this.
Like, when will I be able to go to the New York Times and see that I'm on the bestseller list? Is that
the day this thing airs, like two weeks after? I would imagine that's enough time.
Perfect.
Get that ninja bounce, I think they call it.
You definitely call it that. I can tell. Yeah, I don't know. I think that marketing has always been, I'm not saying anything profound here, but for any author, which I think is almost all authors, even those from the big five, who has to do much of their own marketing, it's not a natural thing. Even I'm a fairly social person, but it's still not a natural thing. It's also difficult when you're working full time. So definitely the state of the world right now has meant that like I'm not doing any in-person stuff. Like I haven't gone on any tours. I haven't done a book launch. I haven't gone to the expo kind of things. But I have to say part of it has actually been more fun, I've realized. And I think that there are two reasons for that. One is there's sort of oh, what the heck, I'll try this sort of energy. You know, like I can't do the normal things that I would do. So I've felt like somehow like more like might as well just try and fail at stuff. And then that kind of brings the second thing, which is I felt like I've won more, like not just creative, but I've had to learn. I'm a technophobe, and I've had to learn how to be more comfortable with technology and try things and use Photoshop very badly and then make the bad Photoshop part of the joke. You know, like how do I use the limited skills I have and like sort of make a meta joke? Here I am doing college professor speak with meta, but make a joke on myself in a way that might actually push the brand of the book a little bit.
No worries. The middle grade ninja esteemed audience is extremely sophisticated. So we can throw words out like metaphoricize or whatever I decided was our new word, and they're going to have no trouble following.
I thought you were just saying that they were entirely turned off by me saying I was a technophobe and they'll never buy my book. But
no.
You could write on a typewriter, like if you could.
Oh, yeah. Well, plus the romance of the typewriter, man. That's great.
I think it's all about to get turned around for you. You're going to become a tech lover and a germaphobe. I think that's where we're all headed. And then I did want to ask you a little bit about your style, and I'll start with you because I've just been reading your book. But Mari, it's not lost on me that you are an editor, so we will be back to talk with you about style as well. But I noticed that you do multiple short sentence paragraphs. Your paragraphs are 1 to 2 sentences. Your chapters are extremely short. I'm getting that hit of dopamine frequently as I'm reading. Oh, look at me, look how fast I can read. So what is, obviously that's intentional because you're going after reluctant readers and you're trying to make great readers feel even better about themselves. So what's your rule of thumb for how frequently you should paragraph, how frequently you should chapter, or do you have one?
Yeah. So I think this book is more severely what you were just talking about than any book I've ever written. More like 1 sentence paragraphs and that sort of thing. Ian, like a couple sentence long chapter every once in a while. So I've thought a lot about this kind of stuff, as I suppose writers tend to. When I was in grad school, when I was writing sophisticated stories for literary adults, I thought of like breaks as only being for really one reason, which was a change of space or time in the story. Like it was almost like cheating. Like I never use cliffhangers and stuff like that. And then I got into this like for hire writing for reluctant readers, and I started to think very seriously about that, like to be proud of that, like how am I going to keep readers reading? And so I started thinking of not only would I have space for time and emotional. As a creative writing teacher, I used to say this. I'm trying to get this right. Breaks used to only be for time changes or emotional changes, perspective changes. All of a sudden now I was ending like midway through a chapter. I would just end the chapter because I wanted there's a cliffhanger and I wanted the reader to have to turn to the next next page. And then I started reading books like the books in poem form, like Kwame Alexander's The Crossover. And I started to see breaks for poetry reasons, for image reasons. And so this book is actually an attempt, I now make line breaks for all of those reasons. And any of them are fine. It doesn't matter because all of those are reasons that keep it seems to me, a reader jumping to the next. And so I will stop because a character or the plot has changed gears. I will stop and break it up because I want to force the reader to turn the page. And I will stop because I think that I've landed on a particularly interesting image, like you would with a poem or something. And I want it just to linger there. So that's how I think of it. I'm just like, no matter what the reason is, it's whatever makes the reader move to the next thing.
Do you use beta readers to get confirmation that you've accomplished that, or when do you know you've done it?
Yeah, so I have I have this twin brother of mine, and he teaches middle school. And so whenever I'm feeling pretty good about a draft, I'm starting to feel confident, then I think, oh, I better have someone, tell me that I'm wrong. I better have kids tell me that I'm wrong. And so I give my stuff to him, and then he shares it with his students quite often. He's also a writer, I should say that. I should give him a plug, and has a book coming out in a month. So I give my stuff to him, and he shows it to his students, and then they give him reviews, and they send them back to me. So I'm really lucky that I have immediate access to that kind of readership.
I want to come back in my next life with you. You got an editor there in the house. You've got your brother getting your student feedback. That's you're the spot. Do you and your brother ever? Do you ever feel like I want to teach middle school, he wants to teach high school, and then you swap? I mean, who would know, right?
Yeah. Well, no. Basically, what I say is, Andy, my brother Andy Hueller, is just like me, except he's 2 inches shorter, and he's just a little bit behind me in success. Like I taught college for a while, and he's never taught. Back then he was teaching high school, so he couldn't quite be me. And now I teach high school, teaches middle school, so I always say that he like is always trying to be me, but he's always just a little bit behind. But yeah, he's got a middle grade book coming out in a month called Life in Increments. Andy Hueller. It's a great book.
Well, congratulations, Andy. That's huge.
Oh yeah, he was born first by 3 minutes, so it's a sore subject. I actually was born with a black eye. I should just say that so that your readers know this, and that's because the theory is that my twin brother kicked me right in the eye on the way out. So that's one of my fun facts.
Born with a black eye.
Born with a black eye.
Patrick Hueller, born with a black eye.
Yeah, that whole like I just push that to the limit, man.
And look at our time. It's flying by, because I want to get your take on style, but I also have to ask about flying saucers. What to do? Is there time for both? Quickly, Mario, what are the biggest tips that you're giving writers of middle grade fiction for style? What are the biggest mistakes you're seeing writers make?
Oh boy. I don't know. I think to go to Patrick's point of writing a story that moves, like that's always been something that's important to me too. And writing a story that's going to keep the reader's interest. And middle grade, I feel, is one of the hardest things to write. Because often it's written in the third person, not always, but often. And so you already have some distance from the characters, and you're also in a young adult book, you generally speaking are dealing a lot more with kind of the internal experience of a character. I mean, there might be things going on around them that are important and moving the plot, but there's more of kind of, the internal and them looking inward and the idea of like, who am I and how do I fit into this world? And in middle grade, it can go that way, but the plot and pacing of the plot becomes even more important in middle grade, because the story tends to take the main focus of the plot, but not always, So I always say that because you just, I think that there's a lot of books that, especially recently, I feel like middle grade has been getting like more elevated in terms of kind of moving almost into the like lower YA sphere at times and looking more at kind of big emotional challenges that characters are having. So that's what I would say. Also, middle grade is generally speaking shorter, and so you're fitting more into this shorter package, and that's really challenging. I mean, I just always I think middle grade is it's very challenging to write a perfect middle grade story. At the same time, I think some of the things I'm seeing, I think the thing I see most in acquisitions that just is always sort of like, kind of an automatic no, is if it just sounds like a story that I've heard before, and I think that a lot of writers, as they're learning, the craft and, maybe on their first couple books, often try to model off the things that they like or the things that they've seen sell well. And I find the most impactful stories are the ones that, as kind of cheesy as it sounds, are the ones that come from like the author's heart and their author's experience, because they just tend to be more engaging and also stand out more because everybody's experience is different in life. And so, yeah, I guess that's what I would say. Yeah, the other thing is, we're always looking for diversity in the books that we publish, and so that's something that is always part of the conversation when we're looking at a book.
Mari Kesselring, have you ever seen a flying saucer and or a ghost?
A ghost? Oh, okay. No, but I believe that they exist, both of those things.
Well, keep an eye out. Hopefully you'll see one.
Yeah,
Patrick, same question.
So. Someday.
Now, you shouldn't end with me on this because I'm going to give you the most buzzkill answer. Not only have I not seen them, but because I haven't seen them, I don't believe him then. like I'm to the point where I have friends who like will tell me like really powerful stories about their experience with a ghost, and I'll just feel terrible because I'll be like, you're my good friend who I trust completely, and I still don't believe you.
What
like,
about UFOs?
I mean,
We can't be the only ones here.
right, but that doesn't mean that there are flying saucers. Like, I totally agree that like it's impossible for me to fathom that we're the only life form, but that they go around on frisbees is hard for me to.
Well, it doesn't have to be a frisbee shape.
I love that we got to all those questions about your work habits, your life habits. No problem, no problem. Flying saucer question, just a little bit of friction. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll keep talking about this after the show. Yeah.
We do. Yeah.
You know what? I think flying saucers are getting to a point now that the Pentagon's confirming where we're probably going to be at a spot where I no longer have to believe comes into it. It'll just be another fact of life, is my thought. But doing this podcast, I've heard enough ghost stories, and I'm starting to come around on ghosts. Like, interesting. I thank you both so much for being here this evening. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'm going to end with last question, and we'll call it a night because I know we're right up against that deadline we set. Oh, yes.
Could I do one quick little personal plug?
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah, you've got a workshop coming up, and I totally forgot to cue you up. Please.
I want to mention I'm teaching a class. It's completely virtual, so anyone from the United States, or I suppose the world, could sign up for this course. And it's through the Loft Literary Center, which is a Minnesota-based nonprofit. And so you can go to their website, which I believe is theloft.org, or you can also check out my Twitter to see that I've been posting about it, but it is called The Journey to Publication, Tips and Tricks for Kid Lit Authors. So I'm going to be talking about some kind of best practices that I've seen for authors who are interested in getting published. The nice thing about the course is it's kind of a go at your own pace. There's no set time where you have to be online, just kind of a list of things to do each week and some information from me. And I've also set it up so that it can appeal to a lot of authors at a lot of different stages in their process. So if you're an author who just has a manuscript ready and you're starting to think about publishing and you're wanting some guidance, it'd be great for you. If you're working on a project right now and you're not quite ready to be looking at publishing, but you kind of want to start looking ahead to that, it can be a really great motivating and helpful resource for you. So again, it's with the Loft Literary Center, and it's called The Journey to Publication. So check it out.
And if folks want to learn more on your Twitter timeline, where would they follow you on Twitter?
My Twitter is just my first name and my last name, Mari Kesselring, so you can find me.
Patrick, where would we find you on Twitter?
I think I'm at Patrick Hueller. I'm not real good at Twitter. I'm not going to lie. Remember that technophobe thing? I pretty much break the whole author rule, which is that I end up retweeting political things. So if you don't want to, if your politics aren't mine, maybe don't go there. But I'm active actually mostly on the Book of Face. That's what I call Facebook. I have my own author page there and do quite a bit of promotion there.
That's where I go off about politics, so.
Gotta have an outlet.
And then, of course, everyone can find you at patrickhueller.com. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
So my last question is always some variation of if you could go back and give yourself, a younger version of yourself, some crucial bit of advice that would have made a difference, it would have made your path easier and might make an easier path for all the writers and would-be writers who are listening to us. Aside from, make sure you sign up for Mari's workshop. That's going to be essential stuff. What would you like to go back and tell them? I'll let you guys decide who goes first.
Do you have an answer?
You go first.
Okay.
Do you have an answer, though?
I do.
Okay,
yeah.
You go first.
Okay, this is something that I got from one of my writing teachers several years ago. But what she said was, when you're writing a story and you're stuck and you're trying to figure out, should I have this happen or should I have this happen? I just can't decide, what do I do next? Should I do this or should I do this? And the way she put it is, should I do A or should I do B? She said, the answer is almost certainly neither. You should do C. You should come up with a different way. So when you're at a crossroads and you think, should I do this? Now, if I do this, then I'll be shortchanging this character. But if I do this, I'll be, forget that and come up with a brand new way of doing it. And that has just been a really, really helpful insight for me as a writer, that I almost always, if I'm just hitting my head against the wall trying to figure out what to do, I'm even if I don't even realize I'm doing it consciously, I'm giving myself too few choices. And so if you're choosing between A or B, forget it, choose C instead.
That's great stuff. Mari, have you got something to top it?
Love it. Probably, I don't know if it tops it, but well, mine's sort of more like it's writer advice, but also kind of career advice. So if I could go back and tell myself, here's a little bit of advice for you, I would tell myself to speak up. I think it's really common for writers and editors to be people who are a little bit more reserved or introverted or shy. And because of this, they sometimes have a hard time kind of, showing their talents to the world. And so I think that that's something that a lot of writers and editors don't really realize. And that's that, like, you're gonna have to come out of your shell a little bit, and that, it's worth it. It's really worth it. And you can start on the writing side. You can write out, what your thoughts are, but eventually you're gonna have to stand up and say them, and because that's really how people listen. So I think that, so I would just say, speak up and, and ask questions and learn, and don't, just don't box yourself in. Be open to all opportunity.
I'm going to call that a draw. Those are both excellent pieces of advice, and everyone listening should immediately enact both. Patrick, Mari, Patrick, thank you so much for making the time again, for being here. This was wonderful. I feel like we crushed it. We'll have to do it again sometime. As always, esteemed audience, find me at middlegradeninja.com. Check out interviews with hundreds of authors, publishing professionals, thousands at this point. Folks you'd find interesting, as well as the back catalog of the show. Download your free copy of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees. And God willing, and I'm alive, I'll see you next week.